Welcome to Big Paul Discipleship 101. The Bible in a Year, Week 41. Matthew 15 through 28. From Man-Made Doctrines to the Great Commission. In Matthew 15, Jesus criticizes man-made ideas masquerading as commands from God. In your opinion, what are some good and bad Christian traditions that do not come from the Bible? How is the faith of the Gentile woman great? What relevance does feeding the multitudes have today? In Matthew 16, what kind of generation is interested in signs? What was the leaven of the Pharisees? What does verse 18 specifically say and not say? Why did Jesus tell Peter to get behind him? In Matthew 17, what does the Transfiguration say to you? In verse 20, what does the faith of a mustard seed mean to you? In verses 25 and 26, what is Jesus' opinion of taxation? Why then did he pay it? In Matthew 18, what can we learn from children? What can we learn from the parable of the lost sheep? What is the three-stage process of correcting a fellow believer? In reality, how often would this be done? Why? Can you explain the parable of the unmerciful servant? In Matthew 19, what did Jesus say about marriage? What is Jesus' attitude towards children? How do we help those in church who complain about children? Why is it so hard for a rich person to enter the kingdom? How is it possible? Why is there a great reversal in verse 30? In Matthew 20, how is the great reversal explained in the parable of the workers in the vineyard? How does Jesus describe world leaders? How should it be among us? Why did Jesus heal the two blind men? In Matthew 21, how does Jesus entering Jerusalem on a donkey picture the kind of leaders he wants us to be? What lesson about money in church does Jesus turning over the money changers' tables teach us? Why did Jesus curse the fig tree? What does the parable of the two sons teach us about those our community looks down upon? What does the parable of the evil tenant farmers teach us? In Matthew 22, what does the parable of the wedding banquet teach us? How did Jesus answer a deceptive tax trap? In verse 30, how will we be at the resurrection? How does this answer any questions about angels marrying women? How are we to love God? How do you explain the riddle of whose son the Messiah is? In Matthew 23, what criticism did Jesus have of religious leaders? What 7 sorrows or woes does Jesus mention for them? What feminine metaphor does Jesus use in regard to Jerusalem? In Matthew 24, what warnings does Jesus give? What hope does verse 13 give? What powers will false preachers have in verse 24? Why is verse 36 important to remember? Why is verse 50 important? In Matthew 25, can you explain the parable of the 10 virgins? Can you explain the parable of the talents of gold? Why is the parable of the sheep and goats important? In Matthew 26, explain the importance of the woman anointing Jesus with expensive perfume. What do you think happened to Judas that he betrayed Jesus? What is the significance of using Passover to introduce communion? Does verse 29 say Jesus will drink wine in the kingdom? What does verse 41 mean? The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Does this show that Jesus understands us? In verse 63, why did Jesus remain silent when brought before the council? Why did Peter deny Jesus and the other disciples disappear? In Matthew 27, why did Judas hang himself? Why did the people demand that Jesus be crucified only days after welcoming him on a donkey? Why did God forsake Jesus on the cross? Why was the curtain of the sanctuary torn? What were guards to do at Jesus' tomb? In Matthew 28, who were the first to see the resurrected Jesus? What is the Great Commission? How is Jesus with us always if he's now in heaven? Well, that's it for this week. Until next time, be blessed.